just one aspect I think is really interesting here also in the question how confident China is to contain and tackle the crisis. And this is that the person who is in charge of dealing with the coronavirus is not President Xi, it's Prime Minister Li Keqiang. And this gives you a sense that China is not 100% sure they will handle this well. So Xi Jinping can, if things go wrong, not that he hopes, of course he hopes to handle this well, but in case that goes wrong, he can blame it on Li Keqiang. That is, I think, for me, one of the most concerning signs, maybe saying that things might be worse than we think. I don't want to spread rumors here, but the information is not always complete. So you have, in the Chinese context, you have to look at such indications: who's taking charge, what could that imply for sort of the balance of power within the party ranks. And if Xi Jinping usually is very hands-on. He takes on responsibilities. He's personalizing this responsibility. And in the coronavirus, there were days where he was gone from the front pages, which is usually not happening. That has happened with previous presidents. They were more sort of acting from the background and only stepping in when needed. Xi Jinping is personalizing a lot. So he's always in the press. He's always in the focus, which means everything that goes well he's credited for that, but it's also a higher risk because when things go wrong, he's also the one responsible for it. And the fact that the coronavirus, he's delegated that to the prime minister, I think is might be concerning, because it gives at least me the fear that he is not quite confident whether China will be really able to tackle that.
And he himself was the person who made the prime minister the responsible person to deal with this.
For such a situation, this is only something Xi Jinping can decide who is going to be responsible for that. Now to Hong Kong, because you asked for Hong Kong. Yeah. The situation in Hong Kong, pretty different. Trust in the government, as just said, is high in China. It's extremely low in Hong Kong. And when I say trust in the government, I don't just refer to trust in the Chinese central government. I also refer to the local government. So Carrie Lam, the chief executive of Hong Kong, a person that hardly anyone supports anymore in the city, not even her natural political allies. Once again, she has proven to have simply not possessing any political instinct, because she left for Davos. I mean, it was well meant. Don't get me wrong. She wanted to promote Hong Kong. She wanted to convey in the world, in sort of in the face of the business elite of the world. She wanted to promote Hong Kong as a business location. I mean, in the aftermath of the protests, I think it has not just been a matter of the protests, but also in the wake of the protests, Hong Kong has fallen into recession. So she wanted to promote the economy of Hong Kong. Well intended. But leaving for Davos, sending the pictures home that you dine in the finest restaurants in Switzerland with economic leaders, has also not risen the confidence that she will be able to handle the situation. Now, Hong Kong, the situation is this. It's there's relatively few infections if you compare it to mainland China. There are the protests against the extradition bill and everything that followed from it, so the political protests in the narrow sense, if you like, have kind of died out because of the coronavirus, because people say, well, large gatherings will increase the risk of infection, so we'll rather stay home. A few local protests, local meaning in neighborhoods, have emerged that protest against how the Hong Kong government is handling the coronavirus crisis. So you have kind of new protests again. Small scale, will probably also not grow into something citywide precisely because people fear to be infected. In 2002 and 2003, when SARS, Hong Kong was the city that was hit the most by SARS. So I think you had 1,700 deaths just in Hong Kong. So people do remember that. And back then, the Hong Kong local government was extremely slow in responding and in spreading information about this. So all the memories from 2002, 2003 come back, memories of terrible government, local authorities, but also of sort of the multitude of deaths that you could see in 2002, 2003. And so what the Hong Kong people demand at this point, or many demand, is to fully close the border with mainland China. And of course also to increase the measures within Hong Kong to tackle the crisis. Then the local protests very often are directed against plans to have sort of isolation, quarantine areas within their neighborhood that they kind of identify a building of public housing or something where they want to send all potentially infected to for 2 weeks. They're protesting that because you don't want to have it next door. But sort of this is the situation in Hong Kong right now, and it does fuel two developments that have already existed before. One is, of course, as I mentioned several times now, critical perspectives on the local Hong Kong government. A second, however, is anti-Chinese sentiments. So you could say, of course, it's reasonable to close the border with mainland China now. But it certainly comes with xenophobic undertones. The Chinese bring the virus over, and might be true in this case, but once we dig a bit deeper into the protest movement, you see that there's plenty of good to say about the protesters. One probably negative aspect is that, yeah, there are racist undertones as well.